Browns fans, listen up. There's news coming from Cleveland that could have a big impact on the defense even before the season starts. An NFL insider has just revealed that the Browns are actively exploring ways to add more talent at edge rusher and cornerback, and some of the names being linked to the team are sure to generate buzz. From seasoned veterans to interesting trade targets, the front office seems far from finished assembling the roster. Let's analyze what's being reported, who might be on Cleveland's radar, and what this could mean for the Browns going forward. But first, click the like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments what else we can expect this season. Let's go! The Cleveland Browns may not be done reshaping their defense just yet, and a new report from NFL insider Jeremy Fowler is giving fans a very clear indication about where the front office could be looking next. According to Fowler, Cleveland is expected to keep exploring options at two important defensive positions: edge rusher and cornerback. The emphasis is not necessarily on finding another superstar, but rather adding depth, rotational talent, and experienced contributors who can strengthen the roster before the regular season begins. That report immediately raises an important question for Browns fans. Who could realistically be available? And how aggressive might the organization be in pursuing help? One of the most intriguing names connected to potential movement is Josh Sweat. The veteran pass rusher is coming off an impressive season in Arizona, where he recorded 12 sacks and established himself as the Cardinals' most productive edge defender. Reports surrounding Sweat suggest he may not be completely satisfied with his current situation, especially after coaching changes altered some of the circumstances that originally brought him to Arizona. If Cleveland is truly searching for defensive line depth, Sweat is not simply a rotational player. He is someone capable of making a real impact on Sundays. At 29 years old, Sweat still has productive football ahead of him, and the idea of pairing him with Cleveland's current defensive talent would immediately create excitement. A pass rush rotation featuring established veterans alongside younger developing players would give defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz another weapon to attack opposing quarterbacks throughout a long season. Another name drawing attention is Kayvon Thibodeaux of the New York Giants. Trade rumors involving Thibodeaux have circulated for months, fueled by speculation surrounding New York's roster construction and long-term financial decisions. Unlike Sweat, Thibodeaux brings youth to the table. At just 26 years old, he represents a player who could potentially become part of Cleveland's future, rather than simply a short-term addition. What makes Thibodeaux particularly interesting is his versatility. While his sack numbers have fluctuated, he has shown the ability to pressure quarterbacks, defend the run, and impact games in multiple ways. For a Browns defense that values physicality and flexibility, those traits would be attractive if a trade opportunity became realistic. The trade market does not stop there. Alex Highsmith's name has surfaced in discussions around the league after major contract commitments by Pittsburgh created questions about long-term salary allocation. However, while Highsmith is undoubtedly talented, a deal between the Browns and Steelers remains extremely unlikely. Divisional rivals rarely help each other improve, especially when it involves a proven pass rusher. If Cleveland decides not to pursue a trade, the free agent market still contains several recognizable names. Joey Bosa remains one of the biggest available veterans. Despite injuries being part of his career story, Bosa continues to show flashes of the player who once terrorized offensive lines across the NFL. His ability to convert speed into power remains impressive, and his experience could provide immediate value in a young defensive room. There is also the Ohio connection. Bringing Bosa closer to home would undoubtedly generate excitement among Browns fans. More importantly, he could contribute both on the field and as a mentor to younger pass rushers developing within the organization. The Browns have consistently emphasized building sustainable depth, and Bosa fits that philosophy as a veteran capable of contributing meaningful snaps without carrying the burden of being the lone star of the unit. Other veteran edge options remain available as well, including Hassan Reddick, Denico Autry, Von Miller, and even a possible reunion with Jadavion Clowney. Each player brings a different profile. Some offer leadership, some offer experience, and some still possess the ability to affect games when used correctly. The challenge for Cleveland will be identifying which player best fits the roster and salary structure. The cornerback position is another area worth monitoring closely. Fowler specifically mentioned that the Browns could continue searching for additional help there, and several experienced defensive backs remain available. Marshawn Lattimore stands out as one of the biggest names. While his most recent season did not reach the standard established during his peak years, he is not far removed from being one of the league's most respected cover corners. Trevon Diggs, Kenny Moore, Tre'Davious White, and Rasul Douglas have also been mentioned among available options. Each would bring experience and depth to a secondary that could benefit from another dependable contributor. Cleveland does not necessarily need a new number one corner, but adding a reliable CB3 or CB4 could become increasingly important as the season progresses and injuries inevitably test roster depth. What makes this report significant is not simply the list of names. It confirms that the Browns are actively evaluating ways to strengthen the roster before the season begins. Whether the move comes through a trade or free agency, the organization appears committed to continuing its search for defensive reinforcements. If the Browns make one addition before training camp, which player would you want to see wearing a Cleveland uniform? Josh Sweat, Kayvon Thibodeau, Joey Bosa, Marshawn Lattimore, or someone else entirely? The cornerback discussion becomes even more important when you look at the current state of the Browns roster. Cleveland already has top-end talent in the secondary, but every successful defense understands that depth can determine whether a season reaches the playoffs or falls apart when injuries strike. That is likely why Jeremy Fowler's report focused on rotational additions rather than headline-grabbing blockbuster moves. The Browns appear to be searching for players who can strengthen the roster without completely reshaping it. When you examine the available veteran corners, Marshawn Lattimore stands out because of what he accomplished during his prime years. Even though his most recent season in Washington was not his strongest, experienced corners often find ways to reinvent themselves. Cleveland would not necessarily be asking him to shadow every opposing number one receiver. Instead, he could provide valuable snaps, leadership, and insurance in a position group that must survive an entire 17-game season. Trevon Diggs presents a different type of gamble. Browns fans remember the version of Diggs who piled up interceptions and constantly created turnovers. That playmaking ability is difficult to find. The challenge is determining whether he can consistently return to that level. At only 28 years old, however, there is still enough upside to justify interest from teams searching for secondary help. Kenny Moore may not generate the same headlines as some of the bigger names, but his versatility could make him one of the most practical fits. Nickel cornerbacks have become increasingly important in today's NFL because defenses spend so much time defending 3 and 4 receiver formations. A player capable of handling those responsibilities effectively can be every bit as valuable as an outside corner. Tre'Davious White and Rasul Douglas represent additional veteran options. Both have experienced successful stretches during their careers and understand what it takes to perform in meaningful games. The Browns may ultimately decide that adding experience to the secondary is just as important as finding another pass rusher. Still, if there is one name from this entire conversation that continues to generate the most excitement, it is Joey Bosa. There is something appealing about the possibility of bringing a former Defensive Rookie of the Year into a defense already loaded with talent. Bosa may no longer be the player who dominated headlines every week early in his career, but he remains capable of impacting games when healthy. More importantly, he would not need to carry the entire defense on his shoulders in Cleveland. Imagine a situation where the Browns can rotate pass rushers aggressively throughout a game. Fresh legs in the fourth quarter often determine outcomes in the NFL. Quarterbacks become more vulnerable when defensive linemen can attack relentlessly without worrying about conserving energy. That is where a veteran like Bosa could provide real value. His presence would allow Cleveland to keep players fresh while maintaining pressure throughout all four quarters. The broader takeaway from Fowler's report is that the Browns' front office does not appear satisfied with standing still. Good organizations constantly evaluate opportunities to improve, even after the majority of off-season moves have already occurred. Whether those additions come before training camp, during camp itself, or closer to roster cut-downs in late August, Cleveland is clearly keeping its options open. That approach makes sense, considering the challenges ahead. The AFC remains one of the most competitive conferences in football. Every marginal improvement matters. One extra cornerback who can step in during a critical game, or one additional edge rusher who produces a timely sack, can ultimately influence playoff races. The Browns have already demonstrated a willingness to explore different avenues for roster construction. Fowler's comments suggest that trend is far from over. Fans should expect the front office to continue monitoring trade discussions, evaluating veteran free agents, and searching for opportunities to strengthen the defense before Week 1 Whether the answer ends up being Josh Sweat, Kayvon Thibodeau, Joey Bosa, Marshawn Lattimore, or another player entirely, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Cleveland believes there is still room to improve. The roster may be largely assembled, but the work is not finished. The next few weeks could be very interesting for Browns fans, because if Fowler's report proves accurate, another defensive addition may only be a matter of time. If that move happens, it could provide exactly the extra depth this team needs to make a stronger push during the upcoming season. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and keep following for all the latest Cleveland Browns news. Stay tuned for the latest Browns news. The main updates, roster changes, and breaking news are here firsthand.